This might be the most important election in the history of the Federal Republic of Germany. 1 week from now, Germany will elect a new parliament and thereby also a new government and chancellor. So let's talk about who the candidates are and what all of these different parties really stand for. Servus and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Feli. I'm originally from Munich, Germany, but I've been living here in Cincinnati, Ohio since 2016. And here on my channel, I sometimes talk about lighthearted topics regarding language and cultural differences, but also about more serious topics like history, real-world problems, and politics. My German newsfeed has been full of election headlines recently, and since that's not getting a whole lot of coverage on the American news, I'm here to break things down for you. We already talked about how and why the last German government coalition collapsed this past November, and how that led to the snap elections that are coming up now. We talked about this whole D-Day conspiracy scandal of the FDP party, and we briefly touched on who the different political parties and chancellor candidates are, but a lot of you asked for a more thorough breakdown of the different party programs ahead of the election, so that's what we'll talk about today. And then in the next video, I'm gonna give you an update on everything that happened in the last couple of months, from protests to attacks to Elon Musk getting involved in German politics and so much more. So be sure you subscribe to my channel and activate the bell so that you get notified when that video comes out. And if you haven't seen my last 2 videos on this whole topic, definitely be sure to watch those too to be fully up to speed. I'll link them up here for you and in the video description. And since this will be a pretty long video, you can find all of the time codes linked down below. I don't know if you guys feel the same, but for me, the last few weeks have truly been challenging mentally with so much going on, both in Germany, but also here in the US. I mean, how are you supposed to keep up with all of this news, get your everyday tasks done, and somehow process all of these emotions? Well, what might help is talking to a therapist, which, thanks to today's sponsor BetterHelp, you can easily do online from the comfort of your home. Therapy can be so helpful to untangle your feelings and practice coping strategies to better manage these challenges moving forward. When you sign up, you'll first be asked about your individual struggles and goals for therapy and the questionnaire, based on which you'll then get matched with one of over 30,000 licensed professionals who offer a wide range of specialties and backgrounds, so you can find just the right match for your situation. And if you change your mind, you can always switch to a new therapist at no additional cost. Since the sessions are all online, you can choose if you want to do video calls, regular audio sessions, message your therapist, or a mix of all of those things, depending on what you feel most comfortable with. BetterHelp always makes sure that their therapists are well qualified and their customer support team is there to help you if you have any questions. Start fresh any day of the year with BetterHelp. If you want to try it out, just click the link in the description below or go to betterhelp.com/Feli and get 10% off your first month of therapy. Many people are saying that this might be the most important election in the history of the Federal Republic of Germany yet, so since World War II, mainly due to the rise of the far-right party AfD. Last fall, they ended up being the strongest party in the state elections of Thuringia, which marked the first time since World War II that a far-right party basically won a state election in Germany. I say basically won because in a parliamentary system like we have in Germany, getting the most votes doesn't necessarily mean that party also gets to form the government. In this case, the AfD didn't become part of the state government, for example. If you need a quick refresher of how governments and coalitions are formed in Germany, I talked about that more in the first video of this series. But long story short, the political climate in Germany is pretty tense right now, and a lot of people feel like there is a lot at stake in this election. Now, since my last video in December, campaigning has officially started. The rule in Germany is that election campaigns can only start about 6 weeks prior to election day. So now there are posters everywhere, the candidates are making appearances at events all over Germany, and last Sunday there was a Chancellor duel on TV, kind of like a presidential debate between current Chancellor Olaf Scholz from the SPD and the candidate of the Christian Conservatives, the Union, Friedrich Merz. The most important topics in this election, according to surveys, are migration and refugees, the economy, which makes sense as Germany just had the second consecutive year with a shrinking economy for the first time in over 20 years. Then armed conflicts / peace / foreign affairs, climate change and environmentalism, and social injustice / poverty / social benefits on number 5. So this has actually changed a little since December, when the number 1 topic for people was the economy. The current polling numbers look like this. The CDU-CSU, also referred to as the Union, is in the lead with 29 to 32%, depending on the polls. This graphic shows the result of 8 different polls combined, so we end up at around 30.4% for the Union. The second strongest party is the AfD with 20.5%, then the SPD with 15.2%, the Green Party with 13.5%. The Left Party is currently at 5.9%, which means that they're over the 5% hurdle for the first time in a while. A party has to get at least 5% of the votes, or alternatively win at least 3 single-member constituencies to be represented in the Bundestag, which is the name of the German parliament. I'll explain this a little more in detail in the next video. But the BSW, for example, is currently polling below that hurdle at 4.4%, which means that they might not make it back into the parliament at all. And same goes for the FDP, who were actually part of the government coalition up until November, but currently they're polling at only 4.2%. Clearly, the party that's in the lead right now is the Christian Conservative Party Union, which means that the next Chancellor of Germany will most likely be their Chancellor candidate, Friedrich Merz. What's interesting is that when we look at polls that specifically ask about who people would like to have as Chancellor, current Vice Chancellor Robert Habeck from the Green Party actually lands in second place, right behind Merz. A few weeks ago, there were even polls that showed the two in a tie. Now, since the Union won't have an absolute majority all by themselves, there will have to be a government coalition, which will most likely consist of either the Union and the SPD, which we've had several times in the past. This is traditionally referred to as the Große Koalition, a big coalition. Or it's also possible that we might get a coalition of Union and the Green Party instead. As of right now, though, all parties in the parliament have stated that they're not willing to form a coalition with the right-wing party AfD. So even though, based on numbers, the Union and the AfD would be able to form a government coalition together, the Union has repeatedly said that that option is off the table for them. So let's talk about what each of these parties even stands for, what they're calling for in their election programs, and who the 4 chancellor candidates are. Let's start with the party of our current chancellor, the SPD, which stands for Sozialdemokratische Partei Deutschlands, so Social Democratic Party of Germany, and they're actually the oldest party in the German parliament, founded in 1875. Up until after World War II, they mainly positioned themselves as a party of and for the working class, but in 1959, they changed their agenda to being a party that represents the interests of all citizens, which is why they've since been considered one of the big German Volksparteien, people's parties. To this day, the Federal Republic of Germany has only ever had chancellors from the SPD or from the Union. Now, throughout this video, I'm gonna refer to the classic left-right political spectrum every now and then, which, yes, simplifies a lot of aspects of politics, and there are other more nuanced models out there, such as the 2-axis political compass, and many more. But I do think it's helpful for you to get a general idea of the overall values of these political parties. Generally speaking, left on the political spectrum usually stands for social, political, and economic equality, as well as being progressive. Communism and socialism are considered left ideas too, while right usually stands for hierarchy, authority, being conservative, and also includes ideas like nationalism and fascism. For my American viewers, I think it's also important to keep in mind that compared to the political spectrum in the US, the political spectrum in Germany and the rest of Europe might appear kind of shifted to the left as a whole, or vice versa for us Europeans, the political spectrum in the US might feel more shifted to the right. Here's a helpful graphic that the New York Times made about this in 2019, so this isn't super current, but but it gives you a general idea of what I'm talking about here. Just something to keep in mind if you want to compare these parties to American politics. So the SPD is considered center-left on the political spectrum, as they generally strive for a society of solidarity and equal opportunities for all people by having the strong members in society help out the weaker ones. And lining up with that, that's also where the party sits within the Bundestag. Now, ahead of federal elections, all parties publish Wahlprogramme, election programs, with all of the goals and policies they would like to implement in the upcoming term, if given the chance. The SPD program is over 60 pages long, and some of the other ones are even longer, so naturally I won't be able to mention every single thing the parties call for in their programs, but I'm gonna try to summarize some of the most important points for you. Also, when looking at these election programs, please keep in mind that the things a party promises and the things they actually do once they're elected, or are able to do, oftentimes don't 100% align. The title of the SPD program is Mehr für dich, besser für Deutschland, so more for you, better for Germany, and instead of election program, they just straight up decided to label it government program, even though it's not clear yet if they'll even end up in the government again. For the economy, the SPD wants to create tax incentives to encourage businesses to invest in Germany. They want to create a so-called Deutschlandfonds, a Germany fund, with a starting budget of 100 billion euros and low bureaucratic barriers that would allow for the government and private investors to invest in Germany's future, and they want to lower energy costs for businesses in Germany. The Schuldenbremse, the debt brake, which limits the government in how much debt they can take on, which was a major point of dispute and one of the reasons the coalition fell apart last year, is something the SPD wants to reform so that it doesn't prevent important investments in the German economy. In regards to migration, the SPD says that people who are in need of protection will receive that in Germany, but those who don't follow our rules will have to go. They want to get the full potential out of Germany's Einwanderungsgesellschaft, migration society, by making it easier for skilled workers to come and work in Germany and by speeding up asylum processes. However, they're strictly against processing those applications in a third country outside of the EU, which is something that other parties have suggested. They want to strengthen the outer borders of the EU while keeping up human rights protections, address the causes of migration, and they want to improve integration programs in Germany and reduce discrimination and animosity towards migrants. Regarding the climate, they want to stick to the 1.5-degree goal of the Paris Agreement, subsidize climate protection measures and green technologies, focus on e-mobility, renewable energy, and hydrogen technologies, and they want to stay out of nuclear power since Germany shut down the last nuclear plant in 2023. They also want to implement a speed limit of 130 kilometers per hour on the German Autobahn system, which is a very controversial topic in Germany, and they want to make the Deutschland ticket, the Germany ticket, permanent. This ticket allows people to use public transportation and even regional trains all over the country for currently only 58 euros a month. In regards to international conflicts and foreign policies, they want to continue their support for Ukraine, and they're okay with providing weapons to them as long as it doesn't put Germany and NATO at risk of being actively involved in the war. That's also the reason they're against sending the long-range missiles Taurus to Ukraine, which many people in Germany and even here in the US have been demanding for months. Looking at Israel, the SPD, like all big parties in Germany, recognizes Israel's right to exist and Germany's unique responsibility towards the country due to our history, but they're also demanding protection for civilians in Gaza and want to end the Israeli settlements in Palestinian territory. They also say that they want to contribute 2% of the GDP to Germany's defense spending, as required by NATO, and they want to get more people to join the German military, the Bundeswehr, voluntarily by making it a more appealing employer. In regards to making everyday life more affordable again, the SPD wants to raise the minimum wage from currently 12.82 euros to 15 euros an hour. They want to bring back a wealth tax, Vermögensteuer, while lowering taxes for the 95% of the population who don't belong to the top income group. They want to raise BAföG, which is a financial aid program for students, reduce the VAT tax, Mehrwertsteuer, on groceries from 7 to 5%, and they want to support families and young people in particular by extending paid parental leave, granting maternity leave to self-employed people, also giving maternity leave after miscarriages, which is actually something the German parliament already just passed 2 weeks ago. And they want to keep the Bürgergeld, which is their new program for long-term unemployment and low-income support that they introduced during this past term. This program has received a lot of criticism from the opposition, who claim that its conditions are too lax compared to the predecessor program Hartz IV, and that it doesn't provide enough incentives for people to get back into the workforce. One thing that all the party programs mention, by the way, is that they want to reduce German bureaucracy. Some of them have concrete suggestions, like introducing an app. Other parties just mention this as a general goal, but hey, at least it seems like a goal everyone can agree on. Oh, and lowering taxes is another point that every party mentions in one way or another. The Chancellor candidate who's running for the SPD is yet again current Chancellor Olaf Scholz. Many people were hoping that Defense Minister Boris Pistorius would run, but he ended up saying no. Aside from being Germany's Chancellor right now, Olaf Scholz is an attorney. He became a member of parliament in 1998. He was the General Secretary of the SPD for a while. He served as Germany's Labor Minister, Finance Minister, and Vice Chancellor under Merkel, and he was the mayor of Hamburg for 7 years. He's generally been known for being rather unemotional and stiff, even though if you watched the last two videos, you know that we did see him quite angry in some of these recent speeches when the coalition fell apart.
Politik ist kein Spiel, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen. In eine Regierung einzutreten, dafür braucht es die nötige sittliche Reife. Wer in eine Regierung eintritt, der trägt Verantwortung für das ganze Land. Verantwortung, die über das eigene Parteiprogramm, die eigenen Wählerinnen und Wähler hinausgeht. Verantwortung für 84 Millionen Mitbürgerinnen und Mitbürger.
And to this day, it's not quite clear if and how he was involved in this big cum-ex tax fraud scandal that came out in 2017. Now, since finances are a major topic in this election for many people, the Leibniz Center for European Economic Research in Mannheim, or short ZEW, calculated how these election programs would affect people's finances. For their calculations, they included the party's plans for income tax, the solidarity surcharge, wealth tax, Bürgergeld, minimum wage, and the climate bonus that some parties proposed. Of course, this might differ from person to person, but based on their calculations for an average single-person household in Germany, the SPD program would end up getting someone with an income of 20,000 euros a year an additional 410 euros. Someone who makes 60,000 a year would get an additional 650 euros. And if you make 120,000, you'd get an extra 156 euros a year. The average salary in Germany is about 54,000 euros a year before taxes, by the way. This is what the table would look like for a single income family with 2 kids. We're gonna look at these calculations for all of the parties, and I'm also gonna link all the party programs down below for you guys, even though unfortunately most of them have only been published in German, but some of the parties offer at least a short version in English. Next up, let's talk about the other party that's part of the current government coalition, and that is the Green Party, Die Grünen in German. Or their full name is actually Bündnis 90 Die Grünen, Alliance 90 the Greens, because after the German reunification, they merged with a party from former East Germany. They can also be described as center-left, similar to the SPD, with one of their main focuses being the environment. Even though ever since they were founded in the 1980s, they've become an established political party with a broad party program that goes far beyond just environmental topics. Their chancellor candidate for this election is Robert Habeck, Germany's current vice chancellor and minister of economy. In the past, he was also part of the state government of Schleswig-Holstein in the very north of Germany, but originally he has a PhD in literature and has actually published several novels and children's books in the past. Their program for this election is also called Government Program. It's over 150 pages long, so there's a lot in there, and it has the title Zusammenwachsen, so coalescing or growing together. Generally speaking, they align with a lot of what the SPD wants to do too. They want to reduce the wealth gap in Germany, which is why they support policies like raising the minimum wage to 15 euros an hour and reforming Germany's inheritance tax, property tax, and reintroducing a wealth tax. They even suggest implementing a worldwide billionaires tax. The rest of the population, however, should receive tax cuts according to the Green Party, and they want to continue legislations like the Mietpreisbremse, literally rent brake, to keep housing affordable for everyone. And they want to heavily invest in additional subsidized and rent-controlled housing. To strengthen the economy, they want to lower taxes for businesses, create a Germany fund to invest in Germany's economy and future, such as the train system and schools, create more childcare spots, and just like the SPD, they want to reform the debt brake. What they also want to keep is the Gebäudeenergiegesetz, colloquially referred to as the heating law, which regulates phasing out oil and gas heating systems in both private and commercial buildings. Even though Robert Habeck, as Minister of Economy, got a lot of backlash for this when they passed this bill in 2023. Regarding the climate, they also demand a speed limit of 130 on the Autobahn, and they want Germany to stick to the goal of becoming climate neutral by 2045, which was decided 4 years ago, and for the European Union to be climate neutral by 2050. By 2030, they want 80% of Germany's energy to come from renewable energy sources, and by then they want to have phased out coal power plants. And since being environmentally conscious can cost a little more, they also want to pay citizens a so-called Klimageld, a climate bonus. They also want to make short-distance flights unnecessary by improving the train network and lowering prices for public transportation. In regards to migration, they're against moving asylum processes to third countries. They want to get rid of bureaucratic hurdles for skilled workers to come and work in Germany, make it easier for them to get their degrees and qualifications recognized, allow for them to communicate with German authorities in English. They want to make family reunifications easier for asylum seekers, but they also want to prioritize deporting those who committed felonies. In terms of foreign affairs, they actually want to invest significantly more in Germany's defense spending than the required 2% of the GDP. And this isn't officially listed in the program, but Robert Habeck has mentioned in the past that, unlike the SPD, he does support delivering the Taurus missiles to Ukraine. Both the SPD and the Green Party want to hold on to the legalization of cannabis, by the way, which they just got passed last year. Some of the main points of criticism about the Green Party's program are that financing all of their proposed measures would require taking on a lot of debt, and climate activists also criticize that the party's environmental policies aren't ambitious enough. When we take a look at the calculations of the ZEW, we can see that a single-person household making 20,000 euros a year would end up with an additional 520 euros. Someone who makes 60,000 a year would get an additional 204 euros. And if you make 120,000, you'd get an extra 79 euros a year. And these are the numbers for a single-income family with 2 kids. Next up, let's talk about Germany's second big People's Party and the party that's leading the polls for this election. Well, actually, it's 2 parties, the CDU, the Christian Democratic Union, and the CSU, Christian Social Union. The latter is only active in the state of Bavaria, while the CDU is present in the rest of Germany. It's kind of complicated, but on the federal level, they usually work together and are therefore often just referred to as Die Union, the Union. This is the party that Angela Merkel was in, by the way, and they can be described as center-right on the political spectrum or Christian conservative. Their chancellor candidate, Friedrich Merz, is the oldest out of all the candidates this year at 69 years old. He's been a party member since 1972, was a member of the European Parliament in the past, as well as the German Bundestag, where he was the caucus leader of the CDU, until he was kind of pushed out by someone called Angela Merkel. In 2009, he actually left politics for a while and worked as a corporate lawyer and board member of different companies. During that time, he supposedly made about 1 million euros a year. His net worth is estimated to be about 12 million euros, which actually isn't very typical for a German politician because they're not usually as wealthy as people in American politics. And he also got a lot of criticism when he referred to his family as being middle class a few years ago. In 2018, Merz returned to politics and ran for CDU leader twice before he finally won on his third try in 2021. Currently, he's a member of the Bundestag and leads the CDU-CSU caucus in there. And based on the current polls, he's most likely going to be Germany's next chancellor. He belongs to the more conservative wing of the union, and a lot of Germans look very critically at some of his past actions. In the 1990s, for example, he voted against criminalizing marital rape and liberalizing abortion, unlike most of his fellow party members at the time. In 2023, he called the sons of migrants little Paschas in a derogatory way.
Die kleinen Paschas.
And he's made homophobic statements about the former mayor of Berlin, Klaus Wowereit. For this upcoming election, one of the main things that Merz and the union call for is less government interference in everyday life. This is what Friedrich Merz said about it in December.
Wir müssen raus aus dieser staatlichen Festlegung, wie wir heizen, wie wir Auto fahren, wie wir essen, wie wir leben. Wir haben in der Politik die Aufgabe, für gute Rahmenbedingungen für alle zu sorgen, dafür zu sorgen, dass Ziele erreicht werden, auch und gerade in der Umweltpolitik. Dann wird es auch mit der deutschen Volkswirtschaft wieder aufwärts gehen.
Their election program is titled Politikwechsel für Deutschland, Political Change for Germany. And as you could tell, they want to get rid of Habeck's heating law. They're against a general speed limit on the German Autobahn, and they oppose any type of driving bans in inner cities, which is something that a lot of German cities have implemented or discussed in the last few years, especially in regards to diesel cars. The union wants to revive the struggling car industry in Germany, and they want to back out of the EU-wide agreement that starting in 2035, all new cars sold have to be zero-emission vehicles, so no more regular combustion cars. In terms of migration, they have a pretty different approach than the current government. They're demanding a faktischer Aufnahmestopp, so an immediate ban on letting new asylum seekers into Germany who first entered another country in the EU or Schengen area. They want permanent border controls, which is something that's already been in place since September, but they want to extend that. They want to give more power to federal police, ban family reunifications for asylum seekers, and they want to change European asylum law. Their goal is to officially declare more countries as safe countries of origin so that they can send people back to those countries, and they want to make it legal for asylum seekers to be brought to third countries outside of the EU and have their case processed there instead. Also, in an additional document that Friedrich Merz released just a couple of weeks ago, he even demands that asylum seekers whose case was denied should be detained without any time limit, potentially in containers or barracks, and he demands that deportations should take place daily. And for those that do get to stay in Germany, the party wants to stick to mostly no cash benefits or give them a payment card that can only be used for specific purchases. Regarding the climate, the union wants to stick to the 1.5-degree goal of the Paris Agreement and make Germany climate neutral by 2045 as planned. However, unlike the SPD and Green Party, they want to explore if Germany could go back to nuclear power and recommission some of the plants that were shut down, which was actually passed when the union was in the government themselves. In regards to foreign policy, they consider the 2% defense budget to be the bare minimum, so they'd like to invest more than that. They do support sending weapons and Taurus missiles to Ukraine, and they want to reintroduce a Wehrpflicht in Germany, so a mandatory military service, or conscription in English, which was paused in 2011. But with the Bundeswehr being about 20,000 soldiers short nowadays, the union wants to reintroduce it and combine it with a so-called Gesellschaftsjahr, like a social year, which means that as an alternative to the military service, people could also complete a year of social service instead, like at a hospital or a nursing home. The union wants to reverse the legalization of cannabis and the law that allows for dual citizenship in Germany, which just went into effect this past June, and which is the whole reason I was able to become a dual citizen last year. They also want to get rid of the new Bürgergeld unemployment program because they believe that it doesn't provide enough incentives for people to get back into the workforce, and they want to replace it with a program that's stricter and less generous in the amount of money that people would receive. In terms of taxes, they do want to lower income tax, but when we take a look at the ZEW calculations, we can see that their proposal would mostly benefit people with a higher income at the end of the day. Single households who make 20,000 euros a year would only get an additional 48 euros. People who make 60,000 would have an extra 1,119 euros. And people who make 120,000 a year would almost have 4,000 extra euros in their pockets. And for a single income family with 2 children, it would look like this. Some of the main points of criticism about the union's election program is that their planned migration policies would violate current EU law, and even if they could find any loopholes, many experts think that courts would appeal this. They've also been criticized for blocking the proposals by SPD and Green Party for stricter immigration regulations over the last few months. Secondly, since they want to lower taxes but don't want to reform the debt brake, critics are questioning how they plan on making up for the missing money. The union themselves says it would come from economic growth, but that's just not something they can rely on. Polling on second place behind the union is the AfD, which is a far-right party that's been gaining a lot of support in Germany over the last few years, even though they were only founded in 2013. They're particularly popular in Eastern Germany. As I mentioned earlier, in Thuringia, they even received the majority of votes in the state election last fall. AfD stands for Alternative für Deutschland, Alternative for Germany, and they're definitely the most polarizing and controversial party in parliament right now. And since I've repeatedly been asked in the past why I would call the AfD far right, let's break it down real quick. So first of all, it's not me, Feli, who just randomly decided that I want to call the AfD a far-right party. I'm calling them that because that's how they've generally been classified in political science. You might also hear the party classified as right-wing populist, or in some cases even as far-right extremist, and the list of reasons for that is long. First of all, the party embraces a lot of nationalist views, which, if we look at our left-right political spectrum again, is traditionally considered a right-wing ideology. They're the only party in the German Bundestag who want to leave the EU and go back to a German national currency, for example. They're very much anti-immigration and anti-Islam, and they have a lot of parallels as well as actual ties to other far-right movements and groups, such as the European Identitarian Movement, the German Pegida movement, the anti-constitutional Reichsbürger movement, who even planned an armed overthrow of the German government a couple years ago, and they also have ties to actual neo-Nazis. Just to name a few cases of where these ties became visible, in 2023, several AfD members participated in a secret meeting with the Austrian alt-right activist Martin Sellner, influential entrepreneurs, established neo-Nazis, and even politicians from the union to discuss a so-called master plan in case the AfD might come into power. And that plan included the so-called remigration of people who aren't biologically German or aren't assimilated enough, even those who were born in Germany and have German citizenship. When this came out in January of 2024, the party denied these plans and distanced themselves from the term remigration, which is a widely used concept in the ethno-nationalist scene in Europe. But now, a year later, the word actually shows up in their election program, even though they officially define it differently in their program and say that they only want to deport people who don't have a legal residence title. Furthermore, a lot of AfD politicians have used Nazi quotes in public speeches or made other right-wing extremist statements. The leader of the AfD in Thuringia, Björn Höcke, a former history teacher, used the slogan Alles für Deutschland in a public speech, for example, which was a motto of the SA in Nazi Germany. He also referred to the Holocaust Memorial in Berlin as a monument of shame and called for a 180-degree turnaround in Germany's handling of its Nazi past. I'm going to link a list of some of the most disturbing quotes by AfD politicians in the video description, but here are just a few of them. Just pause the video to read them all. A year ago, it was revealed that more than 100 of the employees working for the AfD Bundestag caucus were involved in right-wing extremist organizations. And just last month, they gave out these fake plane tickets, implying that they want immigrants out of Germany, which is something that was done before by the neo-Nazi party NPD in 2011 and 2013. And that was modeled after these train tickets that were distributed in 1930s Germany, telling Jewish people to get back to Jerusalem. If you want to learn more about this whole train ticket campaign, I explained this a little more in detail in a YouTube short recently. Just click up here. Most importantly, though, over the last few years, Germany's domestic intelligence agency, the Federal Office for the Protection of the Constitution, has classified the AfD branches in Saxony, Saxony-Anhalt, and Thuringia as, quote, confirmed right-wing extremist groups due to endeavors that go against Germany's constitution and its free democratic basic order. And since 2021, they've also classified the entire party as a suspected extremist group, placing it under government surveillance. They're expected to announce a final verdict on this after the election to make sure that it won't affect how people vote. There have also been countless former party members who've publicly talked about the internal radicalization of the party, and even 3 former leaders of the AfD ended up leaving the party, mentioning that it had gone too far to the political right. One of them even said that he had observed totalitarian traits within the party. There have also been efforts to try and ban the AfD in Germany. Just 2 weeks ago, several parties presented proposals in parliament to have the German Supreme Court, the Bundesverfassungsgericht, look into whether the party is anti-constitutional. As of right now, this is just a proposal, and it's not clear yet whether this will be pursued or not, but I should say that the bar for banning a political party in Germany is pretty high. This has only happened twice since World War II. Now, does that mean that every AfD member and AfD voter is extremist and radical? No, of course not. But getting back to the initial question of why the party is even considered far-right, even if we just look at the policies they want to implement, they are pretty far right on the political spectrum. And of all of the parties that are currently represented in the German Bundestag, they're without a doubt the party that's furthest to the right, which is also why they sit on the very right side. That being said, let's take a look at their election program and their chancellor candidate, Alice Weidel. This is actually the first time that the AfD even nominated an official candidate for the office of chancellor. At 46 years old, Weidel is the youngest of all of the chancellor candidates. Before she went into politics, she studied economics and even has a doctorate in international development. She worked for Goldman Sachs for a while, and she actually lived in China for several years, working for the Bank of China, which is also why she speaks Mandarin. She joined the AfD shortly after its founding in 2013 and has been a member of the Bundestag since 2017. In 2022, she became the party's co-chairwoman alongside Tino Chrupalla. In her private life, she's in a civil partnership with a Swiss woman who was originally born in Sri Lanka. The couple lived together in Switzerland, with Weidel commuting to Berlin for her job, and they have 2 children together. What's interesting is that the AfD is actually against same-sex marriage and other LGBTQ rights, including the right for same-sex couples to adopt children. Now, even though Alice Weidel is running as the 4th official chancellor candidate in this election, it's very unlikely that the AfD will even end up in the government coalition because, as I mentioned earlier, none of the other parties are willing to work with them. The election program of the AfD is titled Zeit für Deutschland, Time for Germany, and generally speaking, the party wants as little government interference as possible in the free market and wants to focus on traditional German family values. They don't believe that the climate change we're experiencing is man-made and find that renewable energy technologies like wind turbines and solar panels ruin German landscapes, so they want to get rid of those. Instead, they want Germany to withdraw from the Paris Climate Agreement, get rid of carbon taxes, keep coal power plants running, and recommission our nuclear power plants. Going along with that, they're against a general speed limit on the Autobahn and want to keep focusing on regular combustion cars instead of electric cars. To make everyday life more affordable again, they want to lower income taxes for everyone, reduce the VAT in restaurants from 19% to 7%, completely get rid of inheritance tax, wealth tax, and tax on owning land, and even get rid of the Rundfunkbeitrag, which is a monthly fee of currently 18 €36 that every German household has to pay towards our public broadcasting system. They also want to reform both the Bürgergeld program and regular unemployment insurance, which they think people should have to pay into for at least 3 years before they can receive any unemployment benefits. They do want to give more tax breaks and benefits to families with kids to encourage people to have children, and they want to change the current income tax splitting system for spouses, Ehegattensplitting, to a so-called family splitting instead. Now, one of the party's main topics is definitely migration, and they want to change a lot. Similar to what the union mentions, they want to change German asylum law, and they want Germany to withdraw from the United Nations Global Compact for Migration and the Global Compact on Refugees. They want to immediately deport all asylum seekers whose application has been denied, as well as people who are currently in training or working a regular job, but only have the Duldung status, where their deportation was temporarily suspended. They also want to declare more countries as safe countries of origin, including Syria, so that asylum seekers from those countries can be deported too. Migrants who are trying to enter from another EU country or from a safe country of origin should be denied entry at the border, and after an asylum application was denied, Germany should only cover the costs of what's considered the bare minimum requirements for living. Ideally, they should receive mainly no cash benefits instead of money. The AfD also wants to ban burqas and niqabs in public, limit the rights of Muslim organizations, and fully abolish Muslim theology departments at German universities. Furthermore, obtaining German citizenship is supposed to become harder, especially for people who don't have at least one German parent. In regards to foreign affairs, the AfD wants to get rid of any sanctions against Russia, repair and recommission the Nord Stream gas pipelines, and improve Germany's relationships with Russia, Belarus, and other Eastern European countries, as well as with China. Just like the Union, they want to reintroduce a mandatory military service, but they would like to replace NATO with a European-only military alliance. A few other points worth mentioning are that they want to revoke the legalization of cannabis, they want to restrict people changing their gender identity, especially minors, and they only want to allow abortions when medically necessary and after sex offenses. The ZEW calculations show that based on the AfD election program, a single household making 20,000 euros a year would end up with an extra 12 euros. Someone making 60,000 would have 878 euros more than before, and someone making 120,000 would get an extra 2,710 euros per year. And here's the table for a single income family with 2 kids. Now let's look at the parties that are currently in parliament but might not make it back this election. First up, the FDP, who were actually part of the government coalition for the past 3 years, together with the SPD and the Green Party, until Chancellor Olaf Scholz fired Finance Minister Christian Lindner this past November, who is the head, and you could also say the face of the FDP. After that happened, the FDP left the government coalition altogether, and then a few weeks later, it was revealed that they had secretly been planning a coalition collapse for weeks prior, but wanted to stage it so that they wouldn't have to take any of the blame. I talked about this pretty in detail in my last election update if you're interested. But their plan to blame other parties in order to improve their own reputation didn't really work out if we look at the numbers. In the last election in 2021, they got over 11% of the votes. Currently, they're polling at only 4%, which means that they might not make it back into parliament at all this time. FDP stands for Freie Demokratische Partei, so Free Democratic Party, and they're a liberal/libertarian party, but not liberal in the American sense of left-leaning, because socially they're actually more on the conservative side, but liberal in the sense of supporting free market economy and minimal government interference. So overall, they're considered to be center-right on the political spectrum. Currently, their public perception is pretty divided. To some people, they're the blocking party because they blocked so many proposals of the current government, which eventually led to its collapse. Others see them as the last defense wall against so-called left-wing regulation policies. And that's the angle they're going with themselves, of course. Their election program is titled Alles lässt sich ändern, so everything can be changed, and their TV commercial is all about how it's never too late for a total 180. They want to drastically reduce taxes, raise the threshold for the highest income tax bracket from 68,000 euros a year to 96,000, reduce and eventually fully get rid of electricity tax and car tax, and reduce the VAT in restaurants from 19 to 7%. They also want overtime compensation to be tax-free, and they want to change labor laws so that there are no rules about how many hours you can work a day, but only a limit on how much you can work a week so that people can work more flexibly. They're against any type of rent control and are against the rising social security contributions. But not just the contributions are something they view critically, they also want to reduce a lot of the social benefits for people and reform the Bürgergeld program. They say that it needs to be up to the people who receive these benefits to prove that they're putting enough effort into the job search, and if they can't prove that, their benefits should be reduced. The FDP also wants stricter controls to avoid the abuse of social benefits, so they want to check if people have several bank accounts, own a car, or if they have any money abroad. When it comes to unemployment insurance and pensions, they want to loosen the rules though, so that people have the option to pay less money into their unemployment insurance if they're willing to receive less, and they want people to decide for themselves at what age they want to retire, knowing that they might receive a lower pension if they retire early. Overall, they believe that the German economy will recover when people have more incentives to work hard. In regards to finances, they also mention that they support cryptocurrencies and even want the European Central Bank to use cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin as reserves, just like gold. One topic that they mention a lot in their program is education, pointing out that every kid should have the same opportunities regardless of their family background. They also want education to be more centralized in Germany, because currently education is up to each of the 16 German states, which means that school systems and curriculums vary quite a lot throughout the country. In terms of climate change, they want to push the deadline for Germany to be climate neutral back by 5 years to 2050, and they don't believe that stricter regulations will speed up the growth of renewable energies. Instead, they want to rely on the free market and emissions trading to handle that. In regards to migration, they think that Germany desperately needs skilled workers from abroad, and it should be easier for them to come and work in Germany. And they also think that people who were granted asylum should be allowed to work as soon as possible. Similar to the other conservative parties, they want asylum processes to take place in third countries, focus on no cash benefits or use a regulated payment card, and they call for more border controls. Regarding foreign affairs, the FDP is for delivering weapons and Taurus missiles to Ukraine and for stricter sanctions on Russia. One of the main points of criticism about their program is yet again the question of how things would be financed, since they want to cut all of these taxes but do want to keep the debt brake. And the party generally received a lot of criticism for the role they played in the coalition collapse a few months ago. Since the FDP doesn't really have any chances of providing the chancellor, they don't have an official chancellor candidate, but the main face of the party remains Christian Lindner. He's also on all of the posters. He's 46 years old, has a degree in political science, and has worked in business consulting and electricity trading in the past. He also founded 3 companies, one of which went bankrupt when the dot-com bubble burst. He joined the FDP in 1995 when he was a teenager and has been the leader of the party since 2013. The ZEW calculations show that the FDP election program would get a single household making 20,000 euros a year 158 euros more. Someone making 60,000 would have 3,209 euros more than before, and someone making 120,000 would get an extra 8,378 euros per year. That's probably why the party is also often referred to as the party of the rich. This is what it would look like for our family with 2 children. Now, unlike the FDP, the party Die Linke, so the left party, is hopeful that they'll make it back into the Bundestag, because not only did their polling numbers just get over the 5% threshold the other day, but they also gained thousands of new party members in the last couple of weeks alone, mostly due to this whole firewall scandal in parliament between the Union and the AfD that led to hundreds of thousands of people going on the streets to protest. I'll tell you more about that in the next video. Now, Die Linke is a descendant president of the SED, which is the party that ruled in former East Germany. And as the name suggests, they're on the far left side of the political spectrum. Their election program is titled, "Everyone wants to govern, we want change. Share wealth, lower prices for each other." So their main goal is to create a fair society where the stronger members help out the weaker ones. To accomplish this, their policy proposals include to completely get rid of VAT on basic groceries, hygiene products, and public transportation, implement a nationwide rent cap, raise the inheritance tax, bring back a wealth tax for people who make over 1 million euros a year, and since they don't believe that billionaires should even exist, they want to implement an additional 12% billionaires tax. Plus, they're proposing that the top richest 0.7% in the country should do a one-time tax payment worth 30% of their wealth. At the same time, they want to immediately raise the minimum wage to 15 euros an hour and then to 16 euros next year. They call for Bürgergeld benefits to be raised, for income tax to be lowered for middle and low income people, and they suggest that wealthier people pay an electricity solidarity surcharge to help lower income people with the high energy prices. In regards to education, they want to get rid of the 3-branch school system in Germany and switch to only Gesamtschulen, where students can more flexibly switch between different learning levels. And they believe that homework turns social disparities into performance disparities, which is why they want to completely get rid of homework. In terms of climate change, they're actually more ambitious than the Green Party and want to reach Germany's climate neutral goal 5 years early by 2040. They want to move away from coal-powered energy and invest in renewables instead. And unlike the SPD, they don't believe in hydrogen technologies. They also want to implement an Autobahn speed limit of 120 kilometers per hour. That's even lower than what some of the other parties have suggested. And inside city limits, they want a permanent speed limit of 30 kilometers per hour. They also want to reduce the price of the Deutschland ticket for public transportation to just 9 euros a month, with the long-term goal of making public transportation completely free. And they want to ban short-distance flights that are shorter than 500 kilometers or that would take less than 5 hours by train. In regards to migration, they want to create safe and legal paths for refugees to come to Europe, allow everyone to work from day one, and create better living conditions for them. They also want to turn the European Border Agency Frontex into a rescue mission, and they want causes like climate change, environmental issues, and poverty to be added to the officially recognized reasons to seek refuge. Regarding foreign affairs, they're against delivering any type of weapons into war zones, which is something that they've received a lot of criticism for, especially in regards to Ukraine. And they view NATO as a redundant relic from the Cold War and want to create a new type of security alliance that includes Russia, a stance that many people have called naive. Aside from that, one of the main points of criticism about the program of the Left Party is that some of these proposals are almost impossible to execute in real life, such as the billionaires tax, since most of that wealth is usually invested in stocks, which makes it hard to evaluate and liquidize. According to the CEW calculations, their proposals would leave a single household making 20,000 euros a year with an additional 3,756 euros. People who make 60,000 would receive 1,314 euros more, and people who make 120,000 would actually end up with less money in their pockets, as they would have to pay about 4,335 euros extra. And for a family with 2 kids, it looks like this. Last but not least, let's talk about the newest party in the German parliament, the BSW, which stands for Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht, Alliance Sarah Wagenknecht. Yes, as the name suggests, this party was in fact founded around one particular person, and they actually split off from the Left Party just about a year ago. Sarah Wagenknecht was one of the most important politicians of the Left Party for years, but she was always considered to represent the more populist and communist section of the party. After the Russian attack on Ukraine, she caused a lot of outrage and debate within the Left Party when she and a few other party members repeatedly blamed NATO, the US, and the rest of the Western world for provoking this war by adding Eastern European countries to the alliance. In 2023, she organized a so-called Peace Rally for Ukraine in Berlin, but critics pointed out that the event mainly promoted Russian talking points and propaganda, which led to even more tension within the party and criticism of Sarah Wagenknecht. Eventually, Wagenknecht and 9 more of the 38 total parliament members of Die Linke left the party and founded this new party, the BSW, in January of 2024. This is how immediately after its founding, the BSW was represented in parliament without even having to run for election. But in following state elections, they did also make it into 3 state parliaments all on their own, and since December, they're even part of the state government coalitions in both Thuringia and Saxony. Sarah Wagenknecht herself was born in East Germany in 1969 to an Iranian father and a German mother, and actually joined the East German SED, the Socialist Union Party, in early 1989, only a few months before the Soviet Union collapsed. In the early 90s, she then joined its successor party, the PDS, which in 2007 then merged with another party to form Die Linke. She has a degree in philosophy and a PhD in microeconomics. She's been a Bundestag member since 2009, and before that, she was a member of the EU Parliament for 5 years. On the political spectrum, the BSW is generally considered a far-left party, but they've also been described as left-wing populist or left-wing nationalist due to their rhetoric and because some of their viewpoints align more with the political right, such as their views on immigration. Sarah Wagenknecht says that she founded the party because the Left Party had become too woke in her opinion, and she wanted to give those who are angry and desperate in Germany but don't want to vote for a far-right party like the AfD another option. The election program of the BSW has the title Unser Land verdient mehr, so our country deserves more. They want to stop uncontrolled mass migration, are in favor of conducting asylum processes in third countries, and instead of focusing on bringing in skilled workers from abroad, they want to first focus on training people who already live in Germany. In terms of climate and environmental policies, they want to keep wind farms that already exist, but don't want to build any new ones. They don't want to recommission any of our old nuclear plants, but do want to invest in research regarding future nuclear technologies, and they want to get rid of Habeck's heating law. They want to withdraw from the EU agreement on phasing out combustion cars by 2035, but they also want to keep public transportation prices low and keep the Deutschland ticket around. In terms of foreign affairs, they're against sending weapons or any type of tax money to Ukraine, and instead call for an immediate ceasefire so that Ukraine and Russia can negotiate with the help of China and other countries of the global south. They also want Germany to negotiate with Russia and repair the Nord Stream pipelines so that Germany can go back to getting their natural gas from Russia and lower the energy prices. And just like the Left Party, they're critical of NATO and want a new alliance that includes Russia. Regarding the economy and living expenses, they're for reforming the debt brake to make it possible to invest in Germany's infrastructure. They want the minimum wage raised to 15 euros, and they want to replace Bürgergeld with new programs that are more merit-based. They also want to raise the threshold for the highest income tax bracket to support the middle class, and they want to reintroduce a wealth tax for people who have over 1 million euros. In the ZEW calculations, we can see that their proposals would give a single household with a yearly income of 20,000 euros an additional 914 euros. A household making 60,000 would have an extra 495 euros, and if you make 120,000 a year, you'd have about the same as what you have now. And these are the numbers for the single income family with 2 kids. Some people criticize that the BSW is too much of a one-woman show, and there has also been criticism from party members themselves that the party is lacking transparency and has too strict of a hierarchy. And as I mentioned earlier, several political scientists have analyzed the party's rhetoric and found a lot of typical populist patterns, such as portraying the current government as a corrupt elite group who are suppressing the general public. Okay, that was a lot. And those were only the parties that are currently represented in the German Bundestag. But of course, there are also countless smaller parties that Germans will be able to vote for on February 23rd. In the next video, we'll talk more about all of the crazy developments that happened recently that are impacting this election, as well as the German election system and how it's been significantly changed since last election. And if you have any particular questions that you'd like me to answer in the next video, please put them in the comments below. I hope this video was helpful to provide a basic overview of who these political parties and their chancellor candidates are. If you want to support my work on here, you can do so by subscribing to my channel, sending a super thanks, or supporting me on Patreon or Ko-fi.com. I even created a PayPal tipping jar recently. All links are down below. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you made it all the way until here. And with that, I hope I'll see you next time. Tschüss!